Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be on this planet. Welcome to another edition of Talking Football here on TalkingSports.tv at Charlie Fitzwhiskey's in Vaughan, Ontario. As usual, to my left, Uncle Ben himself, Ben Walderman from UncleBen'sFootball.com. And man, if you didn't hear him last week on this very program, you missed out. And this is the thing, Ben. I cannot stand when I see touts on these kinds of programs saying things like, oh, well, I went 10-1 last week and blah, 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 and it's all crap. What I like about you is when I talked to you about your record last week, which was unbelievable, you got 6-0 on your college. You went 23-14-2 on your NFL altogether, I guess, or so far. You're 23-14-2 on the season, 9-2 on your overall NFL last week against the spreads. And, I mean, okay, I know you're not one of these guys that raves about his numbers from the previous week, but don't you just acknowledge a little bit that you had a pretty good week?
Yes, we had a nice week last week. 6-0 in the college, 3-2 in the pro, 9-2 overall. By the way, Marty, the last 2 weeks we've gone 10-0-2 in college football. And usually when people come on and say that, or touts come on and say that,
yeah, it's bull.
I say bullshit.
Yeah.
I feel a little guilty myself. I do. But the fact of the matter is, it's true.
Well, you can
10-0-2
look it up.
It's
documented.
It's all documented. It's on the TV. It's on my website. But
yeah.
Anyhow.
Which is amazing, honestly. And believe me, folks, I know I've been doing this for a long time.
That's nice.
It's very, very difficult to have a winning week at all, let alone with the kinds of numbers that Uncle Ben produced. Handsome Howard Kamen, who usually joins us here on this program, Talking Football, is unfortunately busy today with other important business, but he will be back next week. And Ben, next week you're going to be via Skype because...
yes, we're going to be out in California next week. The following week I'll be in Las Vegas, Nevada, doing the show direct from the sports book in the Wynn Encore.
Perfect.
Filling us in on, all the line movements, trends, public betting teams.
Excellent.
Etc. for the week, and it should be, it should be a fun couple of weeks. I'm going to get out and, help people win money.
All right, now, Uncle Ben, you're not the kind of guy to dwell too much on the past. You did go 6-0 in college last week, 9-2 in the NFL against the spreads. But what advice would you have for people who followed you last week? Would you say, okay, go crazy again this week? Or what do you do with the money you won last week?
Well, first of all, you're only as good as your next pick. I know that. Last week is last week. This week is this week. And UncleBen'sFootball.com, we look at every week as a single situation, okay?
Right.
Never mind what happened last week. Some weeks we do really poorly, and you have to go forward and keep your head high. Some weeks you do really well. You have to maybe cut back a little bit, Marty. But my system is consistent dollar wagers throughout the entire season. Yeah, we had a nice little run here. Don't go loading up on the games this week. Line your pockets a little bit. There's going to be some unhappier days ahead, I can guarantee it. So don't go blowing your bankroll before those unhappy days come.
All right, I think that's really
good
advice.
Say, okay?
Now, Uncle Ben...
Keep it consistent.
Right. Now, you, Ben, have said in the past here on this program and in other shows we've done together that winners generally not only win the game, or not only cover the spread, but also win the game outright. No, that's your philosophy.
The actual game winner covers the point spread over 80% of all the games played in the NFL.
Okay, now is that happening this year?
Well, the first 2 weeks, and this was on my week. If you go to my website, there's a weekly recap where I talk about what happened last week, if we did good, bad, or indifferent. And I inform the listeners of things I think that it's important for them to know as a bettor. And just this past Monday, I posted that the actual game winner in the NFL was only covering 71% of the games played thus far in the first 2 weeks. Now that could be, it takes us a little while to get a handle on the season, and it also maybe takes the odds makers a couple of weeks to get a handle on the season too. They don't, they know a lot more than anybody, but you see a little action, you learn a lot. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Anyhow, last week, every single game in the NFL, except for one, there was a tie in the San Diego-Tennessee game, the actual game winner covered the point spread. Not a word of a lie. 15-0-1. That brings the total now this season to 37-9-2. Okay? 37-9-2 because there was 2 ties. I believe the first week Cincinnati and the Bears was a tie. Last week Tennessee and San Diego was a tie. Other than that, they're 37-9, 80.4%, back to where
unbelievable.
it's been for the last 20 years in a row. I'm telling you, you got to trust me on this one. It's going to stay that way. I follow this stat every week of the year during the football season. Actual game winners in the NFL only, not in the college, in the NFL only, cover the point spread over 80% of the time, 20 years running. Okay, and it's just going to keep going like this. Okay?
You wonder why people haven't noticed this before. I mean, you probably noticed it a few years ago. You've been mentioning it to your followers, I'm sure.
Totally.
But I mean, it's not something that's common knowledge. It is not something that's heavily discussed. Why?
Well, it's an interesting because I've been really working this point for about the last 5 years around with people I know in the industry, and they do. There are people are a little skeptical about this situation, but
Handsome Howard is.
Everyone is. But then once they keep following me and they get, and they're with the Uncle Ben program, they realize that in the NFL, really, there's only maybe 1, 2, possibly 3 games a week typically throughout the season, out of 15 or 16 games, where the actual game winner doesn't cover the spread. Now, it just so happens last week they all covered the spread, but that's a little unusual too. Marty, I've been tracking this. Usually it's 13-2, 12-3, somewhere in there every week. So if you can just keep picking game winners, okay? Now, the spread is an indicator of who's going to win. Like, the bookmakers can manipulate you into thinking about betting on a certain team. I mean, we're going to get into the fish spread aspect, what I call fish spreads. Something when things, when things just don't look right. Well, that's what I call a fish spread.
And we're going to get into that.
We're going to get into that later on, right?
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
And I mean, there are a bunch of that this week.
Just to wrap up that point, actual game winners cover the spread. Follow it closely, pay attention to it, and believe me, I'll be informing you about it all the time.
All right. Well, we'll talk about fish spreads a little later. I want to know what you mean by fish spread. I have a feeling you're thinking that the spreads are fishy, but we'll talk about that a little later. We can take a little break. Congratulations on last week. I know you're not one to revel in success.
It's over.
It's over. And
Onwards and
you're
upwards.
looking forward to this week. And of course, folks, we are going to give you Uncle Ben's top picks in a moment. But we got a few things to cover here in the NFL as well. There's some developments that are worthy of discussion. And Uncle Ben and I will do that right after this. Don't go away.